Welcome to the Digital Couch, a podcast about the ever changing world of digital. The Digital Couch is brought to you by Value First. The podcast features leading global thinkers and their stories from the world of business, management, and marketing. Now, here's your host, Shauri Gupta.
That and hearing from others, you've had quite a story yourself. From being the youngest country manager at Ranbaxy, then playing such a pivotal role at HCL as its global head of corporate marketing, and now you're at RateGain. So, if you could just take us through this roller coaster of a ride that you had.
Sure. So even while I was at school, I went to a boarding school called Mayo College in Ajmer.
Right.
I was into many things. So I was really good at being average at many things. But I was just full of life. So I was into debates, I was into theater, I was into cross country running, I used to play hockey, and I was good enough in academics to always be in the top 10 of the class. So it really allowed me to dabble in many things without pursuing excellence in anything. And at that time, a lot of people, including my parents, were really worried. But in hindsight, that turned out to be the blessing of my life because it allowed me to spend time in the library, play football when I wanted to, switch to hockey when I got bored of football, try running, hit the gym, become the editor of the school magazine, win debating cups. So I just went with the flow, and this constant experimentation, I think, put me in good stead. And after my graduation, throughout my graduation, the way I would earn pocket money is I would participate in college festivals and basically win prizes. That was my pocket money.
Nice.
So Delhi University has this whole season where every college would have fest, and me and my friends would just go. We would participate in choreography, debates, theater, and end up winning a fair degree. And that pocket money would last us the whole year.
Nice.
So, because I was creative, it naturally led me to advertising, and I decided to do a master's, and I got through Indian Institute of Mass Comm, which is one of the top advertising institutes in India.
Of course.
Then dabbled in advertising, corporate communications, did a TV show, India's first countdown show.
Oh.
And it was fun. Advertising was a lot of fun.
Right.
Like one of my bosses told me, it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on.
Nice.
And then a mentor of mine told me that if you want to run the company and you're soon going to hit a glass ceiling because you don't have an MBA. And I had a bunch of friends who had done MBA, and I would meet them. And it just seemed like a very non-serious course. People, they used to always be having fun. The assignments were fun because it was all about business.
Right.
And for business for me is very exciting. It's never laborious. And I thought, wow, are you serious? There is a course which teaches you how to do business, and it's so much fun, and you work with so many exciting people from all over the world. And I think on a whim while working, so I didn't even have time to prepare, and I took the common entrance exam as test as it used to be called then. And I got a couple of calls, converted IMI. One big value proposition was it was in South Delhi.
Yeah.
Favorite watering hole, Turquoise Cottage.
Right.
Yeah. So South Delhi, on one hand you have Priya Cinema, on the other hand you have Turquoise Cottage. Better.
Life thought.
Yeah. And I joined MBA in 2001, and 2000 was very hard year. The dot-com meltdown had happened.
Yeah.
My seniors really struggled to get placement. And because of all these tough conditions, a lot of very experienced people came into my class. Planning to start second careers, switch functions, switch industries. And it was a fascinating class. Some really experienced people, doctors, engineers, architects. And typically in India, at least those times, you never had a class which was very experienced.
Right.
Typically, and 60-70% of my class was experienced. So I learned a lot with them. And I joined Ranbaxy. Had a couple of offers from FMCG companies as well. But Ranbaxy seemed very exciting because it was international business.
Right.
I started my career in West Bengal in sales, but went on to then work in Australia, South Africa. And for a young MBA, they couldn't have been anything better.
Wow. Yeah, of course.
Multiple cultures, food, lifestyles, ways of doing business. And it was very exciting. I grew that business a lot. And I could fundamentally see that tech is going to reshape the world. I didn't know how. Tech. I just knew that in some way technology is going to change our lives. And I started, there was no consumer internet in India. There was no e-commerce in India. The startup buzz which you see now didn't exist. And the closest you could get to tech, there were no product companies out of India. The closest you could get to tech was large system integrations, services companies like HCL or Infosys.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to be offered a job by HCL. And I was a part of the early startup team which set up marketing there. Very similar to Shauri, what you're doing at ValueFirst. And HCL that time was the fifth largest IT company, about $700 million in revenue, 23,000 employees.
Right.
But Ranbaxy used to be $1.5 billion company. So in my mind, when I shifted from Ranbaxy to HCL, I was actually joining a startup.
Correct. Yeah.
I'm joining a small company. And now, when I think about it, I laugh at it because even 100 million, it was quite big. Yeah. And HCL was an amazing journey. I spent 13 and a half years there, did multiple roles, chief of staff to the CEO, was a sales leader, ran global marketing. And very exciting. When I moved out of HCL had become an $8 billion company. And last year, it overtook Wipro to become the third largest IT company in India. The amazing thing about HCL was it was always known in the industry, and rightfully so, as an amazing sales and marketing company.
Correct.
Think of it as almost the Harvard University of sales and marketing and tech. And fantastic leaders, a lot of entrepreneurialism, a lot of freedom to ideate, challenge status quo, do path-breaking stuff. Did very exciting things. So under my leadership, HCL became one of the top 300 brands in the world.
Wow, interesting.
Did a global partnership with Manchester United. Did a lot of path-breaking things. The whole marketing technology stack, set up the demand generation function, inside sales engine, articulated the whole brand identity. And then while I was at HCL, I was also dabbling in startup investing, which led me to my current role, RateGain.
Yeah.
So RateGain, when I joined, was a $20 million company in travel and hospitality SaaS.
Right.
We are north of 60 million now. We've grown very fast in the last 2.5 years. And it's been a great journey, fantastic management team, and a great work culture, which really is all about fast growth, lot of transparency, and it's been a fun journey.
Very nice. Thanks, Apurva. You, in the end, mentioned about your role at RateGain as well, and your position is actually called the Chief Revenue Officer. And as I see around, it's a position that companies have started implementing a lot, and this role has started amalgamating sales, marketing, and so many other verticals. How and why is this role becoming so important as we move ahead?
Thank you for asking that question. This role is often misunderstood.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to my parents that, I'm joining a company where I'll be the Chief Revenue Officer.
Right.
And so what will you do? Finance? I said, no. Marketing? I said, yeah, a little bit. Sales? I said, yeah. Account management? I said, yes. Will you be the CEO? I said, no. And they said, is this something which you have made up or does this role exist? So if you think about the CRO role, Chief Revenue Officer, it was actually born in Silicon Valley to capitalize on new revenue opportunities created by digital products and services. Particularly, this role is very prevalent in the SaaS industry. And SaaS is about $390 billion globally now.
Yeah.
And there are 5 things which good CROs do and why this role is very critical. The first thing is they knit sales, marketing, account management, alliances, at times even M&A together. And think of a good CRO like a conductor of a musical symphony or a classical orchestra.
Yeah.
The CRO is the function or the leader who knits all these disparate functions together, breaks functional silos, and really creates this amazing fifth symphony, which results in customer acquisition growth, reducing the CAC, increasing the lifetime value of a customer, reducing churn rate, increasing net promoter score. And the role was brought about because a lot of companies had these silos with their own priorities, and often the priorities didn't converge.
Yeah.
I've done so well. Sales felt I'm still not meeting my targets. So how can marketing be successful but sales not? So I think the first thing which CROs need to do is get sales, marketing, alliances, account management, and the whole marketing technology stacked together with massive goal congruency and reduce friction in this whole organization. The second thing is a good CRO needs to be a seasoned C-suite executive, and they should have an ability to work with finance, HR, product, engineering, to really grow the company. The third very important criteria in being successful in this role is a great CRO needs to be very data-driven and analytical. As more and more companies adopt an omni-channel sales and marketing approach, a seamless customer experience from online to in-store, across any device, the ability to collect customer data and use that to inform business decisions is going to be unprecedented.
Yeah.
CRO has to be very adept at monetizing the burgeoning digital marketing landscape. In my opinion, the best CROs harness the power of data to drive and adopt go-to-market strategies and tactics that drive growth. The fourth aspect, which is very critical, is they need to be very tech savvy.
Yeah.
If you don't have a flair for the product in a tech company, it's very hard to really do well.
Of course.
So you have to be familiar with data visualization, content marketing, AI, data sciences. And if you're a tech savvy CRO, of course, your sales team will enjoy a big edge. And the last thing I would say is they need to be a massive team builder, because at times what happens is even in the same company, every department has their own culture.
Right.
All these micro cultures. So how do you mesh the culture between marketing, sales, account management, and create a unified super culture where you not only hire absolutely top-notch talent, but also empower, enthuse, and encourage them to be the best they can.
Yeah.
It's not about only becoming better than your competitors, but you really want to create a team where everybody is trying to be the best they can ever be. And I think these are the 5 qualities which really help a CRO help the company hit escape velocity and multiple X's every year.
Nice. Sounds like a very interesting role, especially you spoke about the friction on sales and marketing, and that's something that I as a marketer have also faced. I mean, not as an issue, but as a friction, like how you want different things. But maybe this CRO as a position is something that fixes for most of them and binds them together. Nice. You also wrote a book on social selling, which did incredibly well. And with the COVID situation out there, it has become even more vital today to use and manage social media as a part of our selling strategy for businesses. I just wanted to have your thoughts on this.
So, Shari, thank you for asking that question. So when I wrote the book, I was observing a trend where a lot of people were becoming solopreneurs.
All right.
Gig economy was coming up. Upworks, Gigworks, a lot of these websites were doing very well.
Yeah.
And I noticed that how can someone who's never been trained in sales still manages to do so well? And at the same time, a lot of B2B and tech sellers and enterprise salespeople, 60-70% still don't meet their quotas. They get close to it, 70, 80, 90% achievement, but they don't crush their quotas.
All right.
This was much before social selling became famous, and I started talking to successful solopreneurs, social media influencers, chefs, hairstylists, venture entrepreneurs. And the common thing which I realized about them is they have a very powerful social brand. They have a point of view. They are interesting people. And they use the power of content marketing to drive conversations inwards versus them going outwards and doing a lot of email marketing, cold calling to generate a pipeline. And I couldn't find a body of knowledge which really helped people understand this phenomena and make the most of it. And I started ending up practicing it, writing it, training people in HCL, in Oracle, in Microsoft, in Octane, in many other companies.
Right.
And I used to get a lot of feedback where people would say, hey, this is great. We learned a lot. I wish there was a book on it. And to actually test my hypothesis that you can do business development, you can build a personal brand. I actually started dog fooding it. It was one of the first execs in India and my industry to have my own YouTube channel, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And in fact, I tweeted out this book offer by engaging with publishers on Twitter and landing an offer to write a book.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Because I was like, if I can't dog food it and can't actually sell this idea on internet, I don't deserve to write the book. And Bloomsbury, which is one of the top publishers in the world, J.K. Rowling, for the youngsters who are going to listen to this podcast, and they've published Shiv Kheda, who's an iconic sales coach.
Yeah.
So I wrote that book, and it sold a lot. It's still selling, and it got me a very nice forward from Prime Minister Modi.
Oh, wow.
And my whole pitch to him was, here is a book which will allow millions of Indians to create jobs for themselves rather than trying to find jobs. And we need more entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and more people who can take their destiny on their own hands. And that was the genesis of my first book.
Nice. And I mean, while we're also on the COVID situation and you linked it a bit with social selling, I also wanted to ask, how are you doing? I mean, how have the last 4 months been for you personally, professionally?
So it's been an amazing time, both personally and professionally. Let me first get the personal out of the way because that's one of my biggest life-changing moments. We were blessed with a baby daughter on May 12th.
Oh, congratulations.
And we named her Anvi, and Anvi is the joy of our life.
Yes.
And thanks to COVID, I've not been traveling. I've been homebound, so I'm getting a lot of chance to spend time with her. So I'd taken her to the garden yesterday, and she was delighted to see a squirrel.
Wow. Nice.
She's at that age where it's not the iPad or an app, but it's actually a squirrel which excites her. Yeah. So it's been fantastic. I've been able to, I picked up cycling after 31 years.
Wow.
And it was amazing. The first time I cycled after 31 years, I straight away rode to India Gate and came back, which was 35 kilometers.
Nice.
So, and it's been fascinating. I've been able to work on my physical fitness. So all the time I spent going to office, coming back and spend at airports and catching flights and waiting outside client offices, all that has shrunk and productivity has never been higher. I think professionally, as a team, as a company, it's got us banded together. We become far more close-knit, far more synchronized.
Yeah.
I always tell my team, never let a good crisis go wasted.
Nice. Yeah.
We managed to really scale up our sales and marketing efforts massively in a very frugal fashion. We are winning a lot. There is a lot of vendor consolidation happening where RateGain is winning. So I actually believe, other than the humane price, it depends on how you look at it. This crisis could actually turn out to be a very good thing.
Yeah.
Forcing people to reevaluate their personal, professional priorities and how to just become a better person and better company.
Oh, that's fair. And I mean, while we're there, I also want to link it with the professional world. There's been a good side, but the other side has been a bit full of uncertainties. Some revenues have taken a hit. So my question is, what should marketers like me be doing right now? We've already seen some trends from marketing team come up. Some have done well, some have not. But say you're talking about a B2B marketer, what should be the pain points he or she should be addressing right now?
So I think one of the biggest, if I understand the question correctly, is what are the pain points which a B2B marketer face and how should they address that?
Correct.
The unfortunate reality of B2B marketing is, for many B2B marketers, in terms of a crisis, a lot of companies actually cut spends, which is very short-sighted, which doesn't help. And the unfortunate reality in the profession is a lot of B2B marketers think spend equals to impact.
Okay.
And they get into this virtuous cycle where they think we don't have spend, so we can't create impact. If you're not creating impact, then you're not getting spends. So one of the best things to do right now is practice content marketing. Content marketing is, if you write differentiated, path-breaking, clutter-breaking content, you can actually move the market very, very frugally. And the content needs to be interesting. It needs to have a point of view. And then you need to know how to distribute the content very effectively using your customers, influencers, employees, email marketing. And a common mistake which people do is they don't render the content in different formats. So I think one of the things which B2B marketers could do is, say, if we are recording this podcast, if podcast also become a listicle, can this become 50 tweets out of this podcast?
Right.
This becomes small Vimeo videos or Vine videos with one thing. And this re-sweating the content, almost like a lemon. So how do you take this one podcast, one idea, and really re-sweat it and create multiple aspects and artifacts which allow you to seed the content in different places? So that's one advice I would give B2B marketing.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to personally take that advice on the podcast space.
Sure.
All right. So coming back to something that you answered in the last question about RateGain. I mean, the organization is into hospitality and travel as its major sectors. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. And these are the two sectors that have been very adversely affected because of what's happening out there. Yet, I personally see a lot of initiatives from the organization coming up. In fact, it's during these months that I got to know about the organization. So, how have you guys as a team been turning things around in these times? I mean, you don't have to share trade secrets, but what's been the driving force behind?
So I think there are a couple of things which we are doing. And first thing is, understanding that this crisis is not of our own making. And you can't be too hard on yourself or your team or your company or on your customers who are reaching out to you, asking for discounts. All of us are in this together.
Right.
And out of that, we created this initiative called Better Tomorrow. Because whenever there is a crisis, everybody, whether it's your own team or customers, there are two very deep-driven human emotions and age-old questions which people need answers to. First is, how bad is the crisis? How deep is the crisis and how long will it last?
Yeah.
because this tells them, are they more infected than others? Are they less infected than others? Are they in the same boat? How long will recovery take? And the second question, which women have asked from time immemorial, is what can I do to recover fast? How can I become better?
Hmm.
So even if you think about philosophers, there is so understanding the pain, and then there is moksha. How
Yeah.
do you get out of that circle of life and death, and right? And our whole Better Tomorrow initiative was around understanding this pain, this crisis, and how can hotels, airlines, OTAs, cruise companies, tour operators emerge better and stronger.
Right.
Created this portal where we said we will have a lot of research, interviews, podcasts for anybody to log in. No form fill required, nothing. Just come and consume. And we also said that we will volunteer free consulting hours where our top execs would be available if you want to block their time for a 45-minute call and a no obligations call. And we actually called them brown bag calls, that you'll just sit with a cup of coffee and let's chat. Worst case, you will get a patient hearing, and at best case, we'll give you a couple of thoughts, advice, ideas, which will help you work faster and retain senior execs and leaders devoted more than 2,000 hours of these free consulting hours.
Oh, wow.
And we were the first to get this whole Better Tomorrow campaign off ground. And Better Tomorrow became an industry hashtag slowly, with millions of impressions and multiple companies using the same hashtag. And I feel incredibly proud of my team, which put this together. And we work with industry participants, customers, influencers, even competitors to make this an industry initiative.
Nice.
And then, of course, when you think about a crisis, there are two things you can do: offense and defense. So defense was all about cost containment, making sure that we are not bleeding out, we are collecting cash, we are curtailing spends. And offense was all about using the powerful sales and marketing machinery we have to go and win market share.
Yeah.
It's a dust storm. COVID is a massive dust storm. It's going to go away. And anybody who's right, who's poised, can actually take off and run as soon as the dust storm is over. That's our offense strategy.
With you on that. All right. So I think that brings us to the end of the first segment of this podcast episode. And as we move towards the next and the last segment, it's actually going to be a rapid fire. I don't mean to sound like Karan Johar and make you give a hamper if you win. But I have a set of these 3 to 4 questions which you're going to answer without thinking, okay? And I personally think that these could actually help a lot of our listeners and hence the questions. All right. So there's a marketer who joins a new job and it's his or her first day. One piece of advice you're going to give to them.
Understand that marketing is about creating differentiation leading to profitable growth. There's going to be a lot of temptation to do a lot in marketing, but I often think less is more. Make haste slowly. The marketer is possibly usually an ineffective marketer. If this is your first job, be very deliberate. Do less, but create big impact.
That's very cool. You've recently become a manager. What do you do in your first 10 days?
So, I think one of the most critical aspect for any manager is this is not about your individual performance. Managing is all about unlocking the best in people. First thing you need to realize is it's not about how smart you are. It's about how smart can you make others feel, and can you bring out the best in people. So as a first time manager, practice servant leadership. It's always the company, your team, and then you. And that's what you need to do. The single biggest KRA for any manager is help their team win, bring out the best in their team.
Yes. Super. The best piece of advice you've ever got?
Carpe diem, seize the day.
Lovely. And my last question is a book that you feel everyone must read.
So I think there's this amazing book called Trillion Dollar Coach. Trillion Dollar Coach was written by Eric Schmidt, Jonathan Rosenberg, and Alan Eagle. And this book is about a legendary Silicon Valley coach who coached all the Silicon Valley CEOs and founders you can think of. And there's so much to learn. The single biggest gift in life is if you can unlock anybody's potential, your or your team's. If you can become the key which can unlock potential, which coaching is all about, it's the magic mantra for personal and professional growth. And I would recommend Trillion Dollar Coach is a book which everybody should read.
Lovely. I would have given you the hamper for winning this rapid fire round across episodes.
Thank you, Shari.
All right. Thank you so much, Apurva, for your time. This has been a great conversation, knowing more about you, some of the trends, and a very interesting rapid fire as well.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and thanks to Value First team for putting this together. And I look forward to listening to other podcasts done by you.
Thanks for joining us this time on The Digital Couch. Make sure to visit our website, vfirst.com, where you can subscribe to the show on the platform of your choice. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, do write to us at thedigitalcouch@vfirst.com. Be sure to tune in to our next episode. See you.